to the panel, and I hope you will be sharing some part at least of the conference with us if your agenda is not too crowded, right? Because actually I think the panel is going to be not on my side, but I have two distinguished guests here that are going to give a lot of standards, or a very high standard in this session, right? Okay, I see them already. Francisco, bon dia. Jean-Luc, bonjour. They are both, well, Francisco is Director General of the National, or President, I guess, President, this is your title, of INE Portugal. And Jean-Luc, you are also President, is your title? DG. DG. Okay, Jean-Luc is Director General of INSEE France. Okay, I'm really glad to have you both here. Indeed, I would like to have you here in Madrid. That would be a great opportunity to meet and exchange ideas, but unfortunately, it's not time for that. The order of the interventions is going to be, well, the very first is going to be Francisco, then Jean-Luc, and I will do my best to be at your level in the last presentation. Francisco Lima, President of INE Portugal, he holds a PhD in economics and has been assistant professor at the Department of Engineering and Management at the Instituto Superior Técnico Universidade de Lisboa. I hope it's correct. He has also worked as a research fellow at the Center for Management Studies at the Instituto Superior Técnico. This is a brief summary of his professional career. Francisco, again, thank you very much for being here. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joan. And thank you for organizing this conference. I would prefer to be, of course, in Madrid and not here doing this by these windows that we get used to nowadays. So I have a presentation. I think on your side they're putting. I hope you see it. Let me see.
Good. We see it.
Okay. 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 So thank you. Oh, you went away. I don't see the presentation. But anyway, I will. So when you invited me, it was even before the pandemic outbreak. So of course, this new times have changed a little bit the way. Okay.
Yeah, we can see your presentation, Francisco.
Yes, but I don't have control of it, I think.
No, now it's not there anymore.
Okay, now. Okay. Let me give me a minute.
Can you mute your microphone? Thank you very much.
Sorry, I was writing a message to you because I have to off you.
Okay, so you are on now. Okay, thank you. So once again, thank you for the invitation. So let me just try to contribute to the discussion with some ideas, and they are related, of course, with some part of what Mariana was already saying, and let me organize the ideas in 4 issues. First, the code of practice, what we are and what we do in terms of national statistical institutes, what are the new demands in terms of information, and what are the data sources, and first of all, what I call it the model of integration. Let me see if I can explain that. I changed the order. I was finishing my presentation at 2 a.m. in the. So okay, let's say. So first, the code of practice is what we are and what is our role. And our business is to deliver official statistics. So to produce information to society. It's a public good, as Mariano was saying, and in doing that, we don't serve a government, we serve the society, right? So we are not, of course, we attend to the needs of the governments and other users, but we don't depend on government. So in that respect, we are different from, for example, a central bank that is a monetary authority and a supervisor and a regulator. And of course, with those roles, the central banks need to produce economic analysis, and while doing that, they also produce statistical information. But their role is different from ours or from a ministerial office that has to help a ministry to design policies or to evaluate policies, where they also produce some statistics and also produce economic analysis. So in that respect, we are in a central position in terms of information, and I think that our role increased when we talk about datafied society. So, and we have, in doing that, we have a mandate to collect information and to conduct surveys. And of course, the problem that we have now, that Mariano also spoke about that, is how can we access and use private health data, given that in most countries there's no legal mandate, direct mandate to do that. It's implicit, but it's not legally imposed. And connected with that is what we do with that information. So we are independent and we are impartial, so we don't use the data for anything that can benefit or have a negative influence on individuals or enterprises. So it's always to statistical purposes. And as we gather more information, more data sources, there's a temptation from the government to ask us things like, can we identify firms, for example, that practice fraud in terms of tax evasion, or in a good way to identify, for example, school dropouts. So, because probably in some cases we have that information better than some other statistical agencies, some other governmental agencies. So, but even if the motive is good, we cannot provide that information. We cannot cross that line, and that's very important when we speak about accessing new data sources, and in particular, data provided privately held data. So that's the first thing that I want, the first idea that I want to show you. The other is something that we are always speaking about, that is, what are the new demands? And so we need to be fast, and we need to provide information that is very detailed information and that is relevant. And the outbreak, the pandemic outbreak, has shown that in a acute way. I think that in the first weeks when we were hit by the pandemic, at least in Portugal, and at least at our institute, we felt like being blind. We didn't have any information in terms of weekly information that could be provided to the public, that would be provided to the government. And it was that we felt these new demands in a acute way, and we try, of course, to respond as in general all the NSIs tried all across Europe to provide more timely information, and that's important for what we are doing. If we look at the trends in terms of statistical production. The third idea is, and I think that it's an example of what we are doing in Portugal, but it has common measures and common actions across when we look at other national statistical institutes. Of course, this is a model that is probably Jean-Luc will not agree in some cases with some of these measures, because we are different countries. We are speaking about a medium and a small country like with 10 million inhabitants, and we always complain, and I see that all of the DGs all across Europe complain about the lack of resources for the challenges that we have to face nowadays. And so I think that it's very important to gain scale and gain economies of scope through partnerships, through cooperation, and through sharing resources. For example, we try to share with the public administration our resources in terms of platforms, in terms of knowledge, and of course in terms of data, at least in terms of statistical analysis. And that's important because we have the challenge to be at the knowledge frontier, if you want, to use new algorithms, to use artificial intelligence to produce new information. And that's hard when you have a whole program, statistical program of all the information that we have to deliver every day. If you look at the calendar of the NSIs, you see that we produce information and deliver information almost every day. We are producing new statistical indicators, and that's something that puts pressures on our resources. But of course, we have to find ways to find more resources, or at least to find new ways of using the resources, and with partnerships with other public agencies and with private companies. So we call it, and the draw here in the middle of the slide, something that I drew 2 years ago when we started to discuss here. So it's a long discussion, of course. It didn't start 2 years ago, of course. But when we thought, what could we do to take advantage of these new data sources, of new algorithms, and to respond to the new demands. And that's an everyday challenge to do that. And in the pandemic, with the pandemic outbreak, it even increased that challenges. And finally, what we integrate, Duane, you are talking about the how we link, how we can combine different data sources, and I think that it's more, at least in some cases, it's more easy to do that on the enterprise side, and we can easily connect administrative data with survey data, and even with, in some cases, with private data. So we can combine something that we already obtained by administrative sources and with information, for example, on innovation or ICT use that's data collected, or management practices that is collected by conducting surveys. On the side of the individuals families, that's more difficult, right? It's more difficult even when we are trying to integrate different data sources that come from public administration. It's a challenge for countries with no unique ID. We have different IDs from Social Security, from the tax authority, and from the national health system. And we have to connect all this data. And it's more, and it's here that when we speak about the information at the individual level, that you can see the issue of independence and the issue of data protection, that we have to, what we call here a data vault, to protect this information, to keep it anonymized, and at the same time to be able to integrate all these data sources with different dimensions that we want to study. And then let me give you an example that it's more an example that where we try, so this is not official statistics, but it's a combination of information that we get from the tax authority. It's monthly VAT information from companies, integrated with information from the income tax statements from individuals, and some other data sources where we get the age and we can identify each person. And we wanted to look at the effect on consumption. And of course, in the pandemic, so the pandemic here started in Portugal. The first cases were on the 2nd of March, and we can see that we have information for several years, monthly information on consumption, or we can derive this information. And what we can see here is the negative impact on consumption, and you can see also a negative impact if we distinguish between goods and services that demand a high contact and separate from restaurants, for example, from low contact goods and services. You can see not only that in high contact the decrease in consumption is higher, but it's also higher for all the individuals, showing somehow that they react in terms of the risk that they have in dying if they get infected with the COVID-19. So it's interesting to show this information, to produce this information by just combining administrative data sources. And on the side of private health data, I just noticed that I have set satellite images. That's not an example of private health data, but it's an example of massive amounts of information. And across all Europe and across all the world, you can see examples of agencies, and in particular national statistical institutes, to get use of this information to produce statistical indicators that somehow benefit the society. And I have an example that is an interesting example because it's data from Facebook users, and so this is information that is already provided by Facebook to universities all over the world, and where you can produce statistical indicators on mobility. In this case, we produce an indicator of staying put, saying that it's the negative of mobility. And here is a percentage compared with the benchmark, a baseline that is set before the pandemic outbreak in Portugal, that it's the beginning of March, and you can see a huge increase. So it's daily data. When you follow the Facebook users, Facebook follows them, and you have that information in terms of. I'm not going to explain here the methodology that they use, but they produce the methodology, and they have the same. It's interesting because they have the same approach that we have when we produce official statistical information in terms of they have all the methodology, all the meta information. They provide that, and they have concerns about data protection and so on. And so you can use this macro data. Of course, we have to use it. We have to partnership with universities, because they say, well, you are now they are evaluating our case, because we argued, okay, we are an agency from the public administration, but we are independent. We don't respond to the government in terms of what we decide to do, and we follow a code of practice and so on. So they are evaluating, but they say, okay, you can partnership with universities. In this case, it's Carnegie Mellon in the United States, and we have a Portuguese researcher that is working with us in producing these indicators. But so, and it's interesting that it's relevant in terms of that it's relevant and it's timely, because you can produce daily information in the limit, and you can see how it impacted in this case, this is Portugal, in the decrease in mobility, right? And you can see that the spikes there are the Sundays, the week rate Sunday, I think. And then you have as the pandemic outbreak, or let's talk about the first wave, just decrease the incidence in the summer months, the mobility increased, and now in October the mobility is also starting to decrease, and we can probably experience a second wave of the COVID outbreak. Just this is an example of the use of private health data, but it's not. It's something that we cannot generalize. We would like to do that, because it's a company that says, okay, let's produce information. Let's have an initiative, and an initiative started before the outbreak, and it was more or directed for developing countries in terms of trying to produce to help countries to face when they face a calamity like an earthquake or something similar. So that's an example, and I will finally just to say that what is the role of surveys, right? We are trying to replace surveys that is based on samples by information that is administrative or with data sources, and so there's any role for surveys in the future. Of course, there is. At the top of it, it's the unemployment. By the definition of the ILO, it's impossible to obtain that information without asking people, making questions to see if an individual is willing and is actively looking for a job, and that's impossible to get with the information from administrative sources. Maybe with private, there are some experience to try to capture that by other sources, but it's, at least nowadays, it's difficult to obtain that without conducting a survey. And of course, we have other issues that they need to be asked. We need to ask individuals or enterprise some information to get to trying to produce statistical information. And Marianne was talking about we offer something in apart from producing this public good. We have some experience in producing information, at least at the level of companies. When they answer a survey, we say, okay, let's give something back in terms what is for example, if it's a survey on ICT use or innovation or exports expectations, to offer something that is what is your relative position in your sector or in the economy. And we have that, and we offer that to companies. So, we still have to conduct surveys, and with the pandemic outbreak, we had some examples. We have an example of that. I'm looking at the ability to cover the uncovered. I don't know if the other way around, to uncover the covered, but anyway. And I have a simple example of a firm survey that we started to conduct in the late March and beginning of April, of asking firms what was the expected impact, or the impact and the expected impact on turnover, on employment, and what was the effect of several government measures, if they use those measures like finance layoff or suspensions of tax payments and so on, and what was if they used, and what was the effect on different variables. And I have in this case the effect of liquidity support on survival. And so that's an example on the side of enterprises. We have similar examples on the side of families, but this is an example. It's we think a good example. This was a partnership with the central bank. A good example because it was timely, and it was weekly information that is, in that respect, it was relevant, and it was a sample, but at least we tried to. I don't know if we had a high granularity because it was based on the sample base, but at least we had information for different sectors and for different firm dimensions, and that was at least for for our users, it was considered important to have this weekly information during those first months of the pandemic outbreak. So let me just stop here. I think it's 20 something minutes, and thank you once again for the invitation to be here. Back to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Francisco, for your talk. Good. Okay, the slides are gone. So now we have the chance to have already Jean-Luc there. So he's Director General of the French National Institute of Statistics and Economic Studies from 2012. Jean-Luc graduated in the École Polytechnique and joined the ENSAE, École Nationale de la Statistique et de l'Administration Économique, in 1985. Among the previous positions he held, I will mention only some of them. He has experienced a long and intensive professional career. He was Deputy General Commissioner for Investment, Director of Economic Policies for the Treasury, and Director of Forecasting and the French Ministry of the Economy and Finance. Jean-Luc, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Buenos dias, thank you for having invited me to this celebration. INSEE is only 1 year younger than INE, but the history of official statistics is in fact much older in Spain. I believe the first population census in Spain dates back to 1591, and you recently published a book on a statistical reading of Don Quixote, with statistics from this census. And last year, you gave me, Juan Manuel, this book when you came to see me at the INSEE at a time when it was still possible to travel. Well, the title of this panel discussion, High Quality Statistics for a Datafied Society, leaves room for very diverse interpretation, but basically we have a double challenge here. First one is to be, as Francisco said, at the knowledge frontier. And the second challenge is to keep producing high quality statistics. And it implies a certain number of requirements and constraints, like the European Code of Practice, that new competitors, private data holders, are not obliged to respect, and that's an issue. In my presentation, I would like to look at 4 trade-offs for official statistics arising from this new environment. I'm sorry, I don't have any PowerPoint, but just listen. First of all, the trade-off between timeliness and quality. This is an old one. But what's new is that much of the pressure now is related to big data, which makes it possible to produce data much faster, almost in real time. Moreover, there is a demand for quick surveys to respond to the issues of the day, and the question is how to be quick without being quick and dirty. The second trade-off I would like to comment on is between the growing need for international comparability and the increasing use of administrative sources. Because the reference to big data is right, but we don't have to forget that we increasingly use administrative sources which are produced differently in each country according to different institutional setups. Thirdly, how should we cope with the demand of users for simplification, in spite of the fact that the issues at stake are increasing? By and large, the general public wants us to explain complex phenomena, but does not want to read more than 288 signs, the length of a Twitter message. The fourth and last challenge is that we are faced with a changing demand that is increasingly focused on access to our data and sometimes less on our analysis, our storytelling. This issue is of great concern to us at INSEE. But before going into more detail on each of these questions, I would like to make 2 preliminary remarks. First, these challenges are taking place in the context of a downward trend in our resources. And of course, these resource constraints, all the NSIs face, accentuate the trade-off I have just listed. Secondly, these issues are not new. They existed well before the COVID-19 crisis. But this crisis is accelerating change. Indeed, it has been necessary to find rapid answers to questions concerning the impact of a health crisis on the economy, the employment, the number of deaths, etc. Well, let's go to the first trade-off between timeliness and quality. Technological developments are leading to a boom in big data, data deluge, as Mariana said, in ever wider fields. The volumes of data recorded by companies, particularly what we call in French the GAFAMs, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, the volumes of data are huge, and these data have 2 attractions: their rapid availability and the apparent homogeneity from one country to another. We have seen the success of Facebook, as Francisco showed, or of another example of Google mobility in measuring consumer disaffection for shopping centers during the lockdown, for instance. Well, official statistics have been organized in a historical context where only the public authorities had the capacity to collect information at a national level. The digital revolution is changing this prerogative. Official statistics can and must, of course, take advantage of the new opportunities that are opening up, and we have begun to do so. INSEE has invested in data from private companies by exploiting the possibilities opened up by the recent French digital law. This law establishes the obligation for the private sector to transmit data for the purposes of statistical survey. I must say that it's possible to have the data for free, or it's possible to pay for the marginal cost. In the first case, that's the case of scanner data. We have been using scanner data since the beginning of the year to produce part of the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. We just have the data, what Mariana would call the nano data, for free, because it doesn't cost anything to the big retailers to send us the data they already have, just one click. Since the emergence of a pandemic, efforts have been intensified to monitor the extent of the shocks in real time, and the production of high-frequency indicators has multiplied. In the case of INSEE, first, the use of scanner data was hitherto restricted to the CPI. During the first half of the year, to compensate for the difficulties in responding to our business surveys, we began to use this data to calculate the retail turnover indicator. We also used credit card data to measure household consumption almost in real time, mobile phone data to measure mobility, where the French people were during the confinement period. And we have just started to work with microdata coming from a private bank. In the long run, the potential scope of use of this big data for official statistics is very broad, and Francisco gave the same examples I could think about. However, there are several types of problems in using this data. There is the problem of access to private data when they are not publicly available on the web. Generally, what is publicly available is not very interesting. As you all know, it's not easy to get free access to this data, especially mobile phone data. Another problem relates to transforming this data into statistics. That's the first step Mariana commented on. This is not an easy process. What are the concepts behind each variable, etc. And finally, the data produced by the GAFAMs are most often black boxes, unlike the statistics produced by the NSC, which follow the European Code of Good Practice. We have almost no information on how they are constructed, no metadata, which are the basis of our statistics process. Well, the pressure to disseminate more quickly comes not only from competition of the big data providers, but also from European demand. All new European framework regulations introduce shortened publication deadlines, ISS for quarterly employment statistics, FRIPS for quarterly turnover indices, and the draft ESOP on demography for annual population data. And this pressure is going to increase, will increase with the need to monitor the impact of a health crisis, and the European monthly dashboard to be launched by Eurostat with Destatis also provides for more rapid dissemination of employment indicators derived from the labor force survey, which is quite an issue, as you know. Responding to public demands also means being able to conduct quick surveys to respond to topical issues. This requires a new form of organization. The health crisis has provided an opportunity to multiply this type of survey in recent months, and I would like to mention 3 countries that are the forefront of this subject. Portugal, as Francisco already mentioned and showed some example. Ireland and the UK have each conducted rapid survey, business survey, or household survey. As for INSEE, we have led efforts in this direction, which is a little unusual for us. In this way, we included in our European household survey at the beginning of May a module on COVID-19 with 20 questions aimed at quickly describing the living conditions of households during lockdown. We have also launched or participated in 2 business surveys on the impact of COVID. We have transformed a quarterly survey on employment conditions and wages into a monthly survey on employment at the beginning of the first lockdown. It asked about 15 questions in order to obtain information on how companies have adapted their human resources as a result of a crisis. And an ad hoc survey on the impact of a crisis on businesses was also launched by INSEE in September among 55 companies. But for INSEE, launching such surveys so quickly is not customary. It has required us to review our organization to make it more agile. As a matter of fact, surveys are still a cumbersome, slow, and costly undertaking in France. The ability of the official statistical system to produce surveys within a short space of time will enable it to invest more quickly in emerging issues, and this is also a response to the recurring criticism of our official statistics system's lack of responsiveness. And in a way, the critics are right. For instance, we don't have any tool in France to measure the income distribution during this health crisis in real time. But the launch of a light survey implies from the outset an adequate trade-off between the quality and freshness of the results. So we must therefore continue to be vigilant in refusing any compromise in quality. The second trade-off is what I would call it international comparability versus use of administrative sources. European statistical integration aims to make official statistics more comparable between countries by harmonizing the statistics and the publication deadlines. However, there is a limit to this harmonization within the process of European integration in its current form. Indeed, in all European countries, there is a move towards an increasing use of administrative sources. This is a means not only of reducing the cost of statistical production, but also of reducing the burden on respondents. It is a means of producing statistics at finer geographic levels as well. Some countries are very advanced in this area and conduct hardly any sample survey at all. These are mainly Northern European countries, what I could call the register countries. While Southern European countries, and France belongs to Southern European countries in this area, traditionally have statistics that rely less on this type of sources. In terms of population censuses, this process is particularly obvious, and the few countries that still conduct censuses in the traditional form are preparing to convert to a register system. This is the case in Germany, but also in Spain, which will, for the first time, if I'm not mistaken, produce a full register-based census in 2021 using Padron. At INSEE, I must confess we have started to explore this line of thinking, but the subject is, as regards census, still in its infancy. By their very nature, administrative sources, like registers, are designed differently from one country to another, and NSIs do not have the capacity to influence their design. As a result, we have then a limit to the comparability of national statistics. The third trade-off, as I said, the general public wants us to explain complex phenomena, but at the same time, it's not ready to read long and complex articles. So what should we do? In order to respond to user demand, should we disseminate simple messages at the risk of masking the complexity of a phenomena? Well, there is something new here. The information market has changed quite a lot. Changes in demand from civil society, the general public, are a consequence of technological developments and the resulting diversification in the supply of information. Information circulates at high speed on social networks. Fake news is multiplying everywhere in the world of statistics in particular. And since the beginning of a health crisis, for example, there have been many examples of this large-scale disinformation concerning the causes of COVID, the means of treating it, the number of patients, or even the number of deaths. In this increasingly competitive information market, information sources are multiplying to take on even more simplified forms with which we have to compete. And the competition is unfair since sensationalized figures will always win out against more reasonable ones in the race for audience. False information often has the appeal of simplicity and common sense. In the end, there is a real risk that the wrong statistics could chase the right one. In order to promote the good use and understanding of statistics by the public, we especially need developing statistical literacy. Like some of our European counterparts, we strive to produce educative content that draws attention to our figures in order to reach as many people as possible. We are trying to keep up with the latest trends by increasing the number of infographics and videos. While our videos are less successful than yours in INE, I am very jealous of the success of your videos. We are very far from this. We are also active on Twitter and LinkedIn, but we still have more work to do. By diversifying our partners, by being more present on social networks, so that what we produce attracts an even greater attention and listening audience. In this complex information landscape, developing statistical literacy is key. But we act within our means. NSI can never replace the education system of the country. But we try to collaborate on various educational projects with actors from the national education system and civil society. Our experts assist in the elaboration of educational fact sheets that are used by teachers to explain the key economic concept. This is a long-term partnership. It is sometimes successful. It is often disappointing and long. Among our successful actions, I must mention the European Statistics Competition. This is a tremendous initiative of Eurostat taking up at the European level an event which was first launched by INE and which now associates 17 European national institutes. In order for us to play an active part in the social debates, I decided to launch an INSEE blog that has been running since the beginning of this year. About 15 blog articles have already been published on our website over the last few months on a wide range of subjects of general interest, on the CPI and the evolution of purchasing power in response to often tendentious criticisms from experts or pseudo-experts concerning the so-called underestimation of inflation by NSI. On the measurement of employment and unemployment, another subject like inflation, where public opinion has the greatest difficulty seeing eye to eye with our statistics. On the COVID-19 crisis too, several articles, including one that I wrote myself to explain how statistics was built during the lockdown period. This blog format is, in my view, an effective way of disseminating a relatively short and accessible analysis to the general public without falling into an oversimplification of the messages. I turn to the fourth and last question. Should we aim at producing only raw statistics, or should we also comment on them, making what we call the storytelling? Well, INSEE not only produces statistics, but also carries out a large number of economic analyses and studies. For several decades following its creation, INSEE had a virtual monopoly on the microdata it produced, which therefore gave it a huge lead in the studies. This is no longer the case. There are more and more researchers and academics who want to have access to the data, to the raw data, to the microdata, and who care about public policy evaluation and recommendation. This has in effect reduced INSEE specificity in France and our comparative advantage in this area, in the econometric field, for instance, microeconometric fields. And this has created an extra burden to give a wide access to the data to these researchers. In short, in a context of constant reduction in resources, should we continue undertaking this mission of data analysis, or should we rather focus on the core mission of just producing raw data? My personal answer to this question, and our collective answer at INSEE, is definitely that statistics and economic analysis have been from the start the two pillars of our missions, and they should remain so in the future. So we will carry on commenting on statistics and analyzing them. Moreover, I consider that conducting analytical work on the data we produce enables us to have a better understanding of this data and to be better as statisticians. To conclude, data has become a central issue in today's society. The real data revolution is underway. The term datafied society used in the title of this panel is therefore entirely appropriate. In this presentation, I have attempted to show how this new context is putting NSIs into a position in which we will have to make difficult strategic choices with real trade-offs. It would be naive to believe that NSI will be able to make progress at the same time in terms of quality, speed, timeliness, comparability, etc. Or that they could even do all these things with tighter and tighter budgets. The choices that are going to have to be made and that are already underway sometimes need to be made explicit and debated more than they are at the present time. In my view, our responsibility as NSIs is to clarify the terms of these debates. Thank you for your attention. Thank you so much, Juan Manuel, for having invited me to share these views.
Thank you, Jean-Luc, for your presentation. You have raised already several issues that Francisco mentioned and Mariana mentioned also, and I think we will have, after my talk, some minutes to exchange ideas and to discuss. Well, I'm going to give my presentation now. What I hope it's going to work. Let's see. Can you see already my presentation? Good. So basically, the idea I had in this presentation is to show what INE Spain has done with respect to these new initiatives related to digitalization and big data. But I will go a bit further. So I will describe briefly what type of operation and statistics we have undertaken, but I will try to relate it with some comments or with some issues that I'm concerned with and I would like to share with you. So basically, okay, this is why I didn't want to talk about the COVID crisis, right? But I think for us it has been an important breaking path in our work. Of course, and you can see there briefly, we have had we have developed several works before this crisis, this epidemic crisis appeared. Part of this work is already described in this slide, but I will be more precise later. But as you can see, we had already, or we intensively participate in different working groups and task force in the ESS related to these topics. But I would like to focus my attention some pilot experience we already developed on the use of big data. Let me call it in the part of traditional statistics. We had already started to develop some experimental statistics. I would say just a few of them, and we undertake some what we call measures for the rationalization of statistical production in INE. These measures were already conducted towards substituting part of the production based on survey data by the use of administrative data. You already pointed out these issues, and look on the different tradition we have in Southern European countries with respect to northern European countries. They are, in their statistical production, they use in a much more intensive way the administrative register, whereas we used to be much more oriented towards surveys and sample data. Of course, I wouldn't take as a model both streams. I don't think a national statistical office based only in registers, in administrative registers, is feasible. But also I would say that in our times, with the scarcity of resources, it's also difficult to just develop a statistical office based only on survey samples. So basically, we need to find a sort of mixed or convex combination between both stream models, and always the alchemy is what point of this convex combination is the right one. I fully share with you your concerns about the comparability of statistics when you only use administrative registers, and I strongly take this point. About experimental statistics, as you may know already, I guess this is one part, or this is the most important part, as far as I'm concerned, with my institute, that has been developed during the crisis. And this has to do a lot also with one of the points you raised, about the trade-off between short timeliness, high-frequency data needs of policymakers and other users, and quality of statistics. And this is why I guess, at least for us, experimental statistics was a good way out, a good way to sort from this situation. We can develop new statistics based on new methodologies, new tools, new data, even new dissemination techniques that, however, they need to be checked and they need to be compared with the previous statistics, and with the and of course we need to get some sustainability and some consistency on these statistics. So probably it was not straightforward to put them in terms of what I would call of the form of an official statistics according to the European Code of Practices. So the idea of presenting them as experimental ones and checking what is their evolution a long time is in the form of time series, or where the consistency across different units, I think is probably a fair compromise between both concerns. For example, in the pre-COVID experimental statistics, we developed two issues that are, in my opinion, very interesting. One of them is the income distribution. It's an analysis of income distribution all over Spain at a very disaggregated level. And hopefully we will make this analysis and we will give this data in a form of longitudinal data. So we will be able to disseminate it along different years. Basically, this is as a matter of fact, a very, let me say it in this way, simple project to get through. Because basically what you are just doing is you are linking different administrative records that are in our own databases. For example, the famous Padrón and other administrative registers from devolins, state devolins, and then at the same time we process with some revenues, income from data from the tax agency, more precisely revenue income data. The linkage of these different data sets or databases generated a very interesting product in terms of statistical terms that basically represents the average revenue of Spanish households at district levels, really at very disaggregated levels. Of course, we were able not only to obtain average measures, but we could also obtain, for example, inequality measures that give a very powerful results. Of course, this is only possible to do it in a year by year per year basis, which is not really what we would like to have now. We would like to have more frequency, but we sacrifice somehow frequency by granularity, which are issues that are also of high demand in our statistics. A second product that is also of interest, let me put it in this way, is what we call the analysis of mobility through mobile data phones. As an original idea, and this is why it was included in these pre-COVID products, was designed for or to compute these mobility matrix that are of long tradition in population censuses. And this is why we brought this idea of the analysis of mobility through mobile data phones. Of course, in this case, we have a different situation because the data are coming from private sectors, and then and this has to do a lot with what Mariana pointed out. There we need to get a compromise again, a trade-off on to what extent we want to know about the characteristics of this nano data. Ideally, we would like to have the root data or the crude data from these private companies to compute our statistics. But there is a problem there. There is a problem there, which is the availability and the capacity of national statistical offices to, from this data, be able to produce statistics in the standards we are used to. Are national statistical offices willing to do this investment? If this is the case, that would be fine. But otherwise, there is needed some kind of compromise between the work done by the statistical offices and the work done in the private sector. Of course, there we have a risk, and the risk would be what you, Francisco, already pointed out, Jean-Luc also pointed out, about black boxes. If we want to have data of quality, we need to know perfectly what is going on these sources of data, and we need to produce statistics according to this. There is, of course, a danger there, but we have also to, or we need to handle it from the point of view of statistics. Well, I will describe a bit more on detail later these experiences we are having, but let me just pass to the post-COVID crisis, or to the COVID crisis. What happened there? This was already pointed out by our state secretary. Somehow, both from the institutional point of view and from the population, the crisis came with new demands on statistical information, more granularity, and of course, high frequency data. We, as your institutes, and other colleagues from the European Union, we try to react from this to this demand in terms of getting more granular and more frequent data, and furthermore going to new operations that we believe they were, or they could be possible, or possible interest for users. There, I would say that we have experienced a considerable boost on the side of experimental statistics, and again, the necessity oblige us to use new data sources to somehow accomplish or cope with problems that came into the traditional statistics. When the lockout appeared, we found ourselves with problems with the personal surveys. We had doubts about response rates in our business or in our household statistics. So somehow we needed to be prepared. We needed to be prepared to give alternative sources of information for these statistics, because of course we are in a club. We have compromise. We have calendars, and we need to fill the expectations we have already there. So we needed to do our work, and let me say that it was also a surprise for me that everything went smoothly and everything went rather fine. We had to use sometimes the new sources of information, but of course, at least in our experience, the response rate kept considerably stable, and we were able to come up with our products without not too much difficulties. Well, apart from this, I must say that there has been a strong impulse from the European Statistical Club, new task force, and furthermore, I would say, or I would point out a magic somehow coincidence. The European Strategy for Data appeared last February, and it seems to be there is a compromise from the Commission to drop new legislation during these next years to develop this European strategy. I think this is a magic intersection between our necessity to get new sources of data and this conscious of the data space, or this presence of the European data space, of these common European data spaces. Well, from the pre-COVID initiatives, let me just make a couple of comments about scanner data for consumer price index, and from the experimental statistics I already mentioned it, the distributions of household income and mobility based on mobile phone positions. Scanner data. I know already in France you have a very interesting experiences about this. For me, if I had to be a couple of highlights about this issue, I would mention two. The first of all, interest of private companies in collaborating with the national institutes in the production of these statistics. We didn't have, of course, we have problems of exchanging information. We have to talk to them. We have to convince them that we are there for good, for the public good. But in principle, they had a lot of interest in sharing this data with us. And this was something that it was very remarkable. The second point that I would like to highlight here is the fact that we have a very interesting methodological problems there that I have already pointed out before. We need to combine different sources of data, in this case, scanner data and samples, again, from the small shops or from the little business that they are not able to provide this information in digital ways. In this case, we have already solved this. We have exchanged our ideas, for example, with INSEE France. We know the way you have already solved this problem, these methodological problems also. But there are still many other open questions that need to be fixed out there and that attract our attention. This is in fact what I was mentioning. Just tell you that the first release was already made in January 2020, and that in the first phase of this statistics, the information incorporated has been related to packaged food, beverage, cleaning and home maintenance products, pharmacy products, foods and products for pets and personal care items. It's already very few. It's a starting point, but the results have been quite satisfactory in these terms. Well, the distribution of household income atlas, I already told you again. This is a way to reflect the granularity of the information we are able to get that has really attracted a lot of attention from our users. Just to tell you that the day we published this information, these statistics, our web was blocked because of the amazing amount of users that try to navigate in our maps, in our designs. By the way, again, an important issue, dissemination. I think digitalization and mostly the crisis we are facing are going to affect in a very important way the way we disseminate our statistical products. We will have new products, new granularity, high frequency data, and new statistical ways to show this data to users, new dissemination ways. Okay, what about post-COVID initiatives that attracted my attention? We have an important experience in quarterly national accounts, and this is something already mentioned somewhere. As you surely know, the need of immediateness makes that sometimes, and for some indicators, the last month of the quarter needs to be forecast using statistical models. Of course, when you face an so surprising shock for the economy, as it was the COVID-19 virus or crisis, our models do experience a lot of problems to forecast. Or let me put it in this way, the forecasts are usually not very accurate. A solution for this problem can be to look for new sources of data that somehow can mimic the behavior of the original indicators and can help them, at least in the flash estimates, to present data, a more realistic idea of what is going on. I would like to mention, for example, information that has came from the tax agency. We have available already TVA declarations, daily TVA declaration from the largest enterprise in Spain. We have available already all information for consumer, for credit cards. And we have already a very important and very precise information, timely information, I would say, from the audit agency in Spain. All this information has been crucial to give feasible results from for the quarterly national accounts. Results, by the way, that, for example, for the second quarter have been very precise. I mean, in fact, our second estimation has presented all very similar results to the flash. Well, also for short-term business indicators, we had needed some information or some additional information for new data. As a matter of fact, as I said before, we didn't experience a breakdown in the response rates from enterprise, from firms. But in any case, we could check this information that was coming from surveys with these new sources of data, basically coming from the tax agency office. Well, from the point of view of experimental statistics, we have developed two projects that I'm frankly proud of. As you probably know, here in Spain there has been some discussion with respect to the number of deaths has been caused by the pandemic. In fact, I think the experience is probably similar with other institutes. However, in Spain we have some additional problems related with the way the deaths are reported to the public administration. This has created during the pandemic some jams, some collapses that have caused that the number of daily deaths was difficult to produce. We have data, or we have figures, but these figures were in the subsequent days somehow modified. This created quite a lot of controversy, and we decided to come up with experience or with experimental statistics that was basically a weekly death estimates during the COVID outbreak. We are still running on this experimental statistics until I guess 10th of November, when we will give the official figures for the 6 first months of this year, and then it will be done. The idea is to estimate the daily, or in this case, the weekly deaths, using information from past years and using the information we are obtaining from digital registers. Unfortunately, all sources of information from deaths in Spain, from their registers, are not digitalized. And this is what makes impossible for us to give the daily data in terms of deaths. Well, we have also some measurement of large business daily retail trade. I think they are going to be, this experimental statistics is going to be of great value for analysts in the short run. And we are developing some more projects that are related with statistics of tourism. Basically, we are using web scraping, credit cards information, and again, mobile phone information. Let me say, as a general experience, of course, the next step would be to take these experimental statistics, if they have worked well and they have fit to our quality standards, and adjust them to official statistics, to put them to work into official statistics. And again, we have the exciting problem of combination of different information sources. We are working for some products again in the methodology, and I think this is going to be a very interesting experience that we will share with you in the next months. Okay, so I think this is already. Sorry, I just developed my talk without looking too much to the slides. They are available for those who want to make it. The last but not the least, we need, for new data and new methodologies, we need new people, or let me put it in this way, the same people, but new backgrounds. We need new profiles. We need data scientists in our institutes. And this is a very challenging point. Here in INE Spain, we have already undertaken we have fully changed the contents of the public competitions just to allow for these new profiles we are going to need in the next decades of production of official statistics. The competition is now open, and I cannot unfortunately share with you the experience with having about that, but I hope we will tell you about next year's. Okay, I think this is going to be my intervention, because otherwise we will get out of a schedule. Thank you very much for your attention, and I think we will now go to the questions made by the attendants, and by this poll we have disseminated. I would like also to make the results. In any case, maybe Francisco, Jean-Luc, you might like to make some comments or some remarks. The time is yours now.
Francesco first.
Jean-Luc, if you want, you can step in.
Yeah.
Please.
Oh, sorry. Well, maybe I could raise 2 or 3 points. One question in the chat is about the training of people in computer science, machine learning, and so on. Well, the case of France is a little bit specific, because when we hire new people, we hire civil servants who are trained in two schools. ENSA is one of these 2 schools. And in these schools, there are already a lot of courses and programs about AI, machine learning, etc. So we are a new data scientist, young data scientist, at exactly at the same cost that we are paid exactly the same that other civil servants hired at the same time, who are going to be involved in methodological issues as statisticians or as economists or economic policy business. So we don't have any problems with to pay them more to hire this data scientist. Of course, they are civil servants, but they can leave the administration to go to a private sector. Drawing from my experience before as regards economist, or I think that maybe 50% of them are going to leave to join the private company, and 50% of them are going to remain at INSEE or in our other statistical bodies. Second question was raised by Juan Manuel about the interest for private companies to collaborate with us. Well, I can take the example of the credit card, the pool of banks dealing with credit card transactions in France. We try to have a collaboration with them. We have tried for many years to collaborate with them and to have access to the credit card transactions data. And only the health crisis could boost this stronger weighted collaboration. And why? Because first of all, the bankers, the senior bankers I could call, were very sensitive to the general interest for the public to have this information, and where some of them were former civil servants in the treasury, some of them could be influent enough to boost this collaboration. And secondly, they were very sensitive to the reputation, because in our first press releases, when we did the nowcasting, and we said the first time when I said we had a loss of more than 30% of GDP, we paid we paid attention to thank all our partners, and I think that this pool of credit card transactions was very sensitive to the gain in reputation they had in collaborating with us and having such advertisement on their work. Maybe if I want to stay short, I'll just stick to these two points. And I give you the floor, Francesco.
Okay, thank you. I see a question about the granularity. Well, we are trying to. We have administrative sources, so it means that we are not constrained by, for some indicators, we are not constrained by the samples. And we are starting a project in a partnership with universities and other institutions to provide information for the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals at the local level. When we have information, we can put that. So it means that we have detailed information concerning training. That's an issue. That's an issue when, well, it's public services, so we have to hire public servants, and we are constrained by. We are independent except for on everything except for that we depend on the taxpayers' money, as Mariana said at the beginning. So we have some constraints on that side. We try to compensate with the internal training, and in fact, we don't restrict training to IT people. We also train across the organization. We have even courses designed for we tried that last year, design for managers in terms of data science, for them to know what are the new techniques, not that we impose that our directors have to, our head of units have to know how to work in Python, but at least to know what are the algorithms, for example, in natural language processing and so on. And we even offer that training to heads of other public administrative agencies. So we try to do that, but it's difficult, of course. We try to compensate that with partnerships with universities like other NSIs and try to give scholarships and so on to have young blood here that can share and can share new approaches and new knowledge within the organization. There's a question also about the strategic choosing. Well, I don't. What I can say is that no, I think that that's something that we don't concede, and I think that I speak for all of the heads of the NSIs. We don't concede on the code of practice. We cannot, because when someone answers the labor force survey, for example, the question, they give us information that is personal information, and we use that personal information to produce statistics on labor market, for example. But it's based on confidence, right? It's based on it's of course people are obliged to answer surveys, but the whole system it's based on trusting that the NSIs, the National Statistical Institutes, use information to produce high quality statistics, and we only use data for producing statistics. We don't use data for other purposes, and that's very, very important and to make that point. Okay, thank you, Joanne. I don't know if.
Yeah, I'm looking at some other possible questions. Let me see. I think we have already we brought a poll that I can see there the results. Let's see. The question we brought for a poll was, big data is becoming a high important source for the production of statistics and the discussion regarding the access to privately held data for the production of official statistics is now on the agenda of the main statistical forums. How do you think this access should be achieved? Okay, so basically this long question is about how to achieve these new data sources, and we offer 4 different questions to the attendants. The question A was by law, but totally free of charge for official statistics. B is by law, but with a different payment to compensate the work carried out by the a direct payment, to compensate the work carried out by the private data holders. C, it has to be achieved through the establishment of win-win partnerships with relevant data holders, exchanging knowledge, methods, and occasionally a direct payment. And D, private data holders should be allowed to produce official statistics under a quality certification by the National Statistical Institute. I don't know what you think about these different opinions. I can see in the polls that the audience is quite divided between the 3 different answers, although the last one is not very, we were not very enthusiastic about the last one. Although there was a 9% of our attendees that support this idea, that private holders could produce their own, could produce official statistics. Can I ask what would you have answered of this poll?
Well, I think that, well, of course I would answer A, right? It's by law totally free, of course, but when I look at it, it's A and C, in the sense that we need partnerships and we need to find ways to cooperate, even if in the law we don't have a statistical policeman, right? That we don't want to force people, and so it's important to have them on board and be engaged in this process of producing valuable statistical information. So I think yes, we need partnerships in that sense. Okay, thank you.
So you are among the majority, right?
No, but I answered A, right? I have to answer A, right? It's by law totally free. I'm in my position, but I agree that I practice C. We try to practice C in the sense that we try to establish partnerships and show the need for that particular data source and what we can produce, how we can offer something in return in terms of also statistical information and so on. So I think that's something that needs to be. We need to work on that, right?
Yeah. What about you, Jean-Luc? What do you think?
Well, once again, the answers are not exclusive. I think I would have answered B, but an amendment B, I'm going to explain, and C. And in the case of scanner data, we had first a partnership and at the end legal provisions. Because at the end we need legal provisions. So we must have C at the start and A or B at the end of the day. In my view, I can accept to pay a little amount, as I said before in my presentation, that is just the marginal cost. Generally speaking, it's a little amount. That's why I said an amended B. Well, we tried D. We have introduced for many years quality labeling process for statistics produced by the private sector. It was unsuccessful. There are only a few candidates which applied for this certification. Just one was successful, and well, it no longer exists in a way, practically speaking. I think the private data holders, it's very difficult to interest them to this kind of quality certification from our part. Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's a difficult question. I understand why our statistical community is divided among A, B, and C, right? In principle, Francisco, I would agree with you. I mean, it's just I would like to have it by law and free. The main concerns I have about this is what I already mentioned it in my talk. My experience is quite different according to the source of data we are using or we are needing. For example, with the scanner data, I told you, and I think Jean-Luc shares with me this experience. Usually, enterprises are quite open to give this data to statistical offices. There is some sort of social responsibility on the real part, on the backside of this, and basically they are happy if you show society that they are collaborating with you in something that is for a public good. So somehow there are, I tell you, problems or technical problems sometimes to exchange data, but nothing that cannot be solved. On the other side, we face with much more complex data sets, that for example, mobile phone data sets. There, as I already said, I have my doubts that we can achieve the technological level or the specialization these companies have to produce and to handle this type of data. Of course, we could do it, or we would be able to do it, but I don't know what effort. And this is probably my concern with the answer A. I probably would feel more comfortable in answer B or C, in the sense that we need partnerships. We need partnerships, and we need to find out a point between where we can have, or we can be able to produce our data without using black boxes, and of course keeping control on the quality of the product, but at the same time not incurring in too excessive costs in terms of updating the technical process to obtain this data. At the end of the day, of course, we need some legal basement or some legal foundation to understand and to handle this exchange of data. That's clear, and I share fully the opinion with you. Okay, do we have some other question from the audience? I think not. I think not. I think we are on time, I would say. Great. For being a Spanish company, it's not too bad. Okay, Francisco, Jean-Luc, it was a pleasure to have you here. Well, at least virtually. I hope we will be able to. I don't know. You said INSEE is going to have his 75th birthday next year, or
yes.
Am I correct? Well, maybe if you organize something. This is very impolite from me, I tell you, because I'm. But maybe I hope next year we will be able to meet. If you're organizing something, to meet in present in Paris.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yes.
And I tell you the same, Francisco.
Okay.
I hope we will be able to have time and to have really the opportunity to meet in present in the short run. Let us put it in 2021. Hope it will be the case. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Merci beaucoup, obrigado,
Thank you.
and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think that the morning session has been very interesting and intense, and it's probably now time for a time break. The conference will resume at 3 o'clock with a keynote speech on as a keynote speech from the Governor of the Bank of Spain, Mr. Pablo Hernández de Cos, and he's going to talk about statistical production on and economic policy making, a view from a central bank. Well, I just got information that the session will not start at 3. It will start at 3:30, 15:30. Okay, we have a slight delay of 30 minutes. So I say it again, the keynote speech from the Governor of the Bank of Spain will start at 15:30. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and see you this afternoon.